Stop taking melatonin at 10 p.m. Most people treat it like a sedative and pop it before bed, hoping for the best. A 2024 trial with 64 adults found that 2 milligrams at 8 p.m. improved sleep onset by 7 minutes, but raised next-day cortisol. The problem is timing, not the hormone. A 2022 meta-analysis of 30 RCTs confirms that dosing time drives the effect more than milligrams. We'll show you the exact window when melatonin shifts your clock instead of leaving you foggy the next morning. You know the routine. It's 10 at night and you've been staring at a screen all evening, but your brain is still running at full speed, while your body wants to shut down. You reach for the bottle. The label says take it 30 to 60 minutes before bed, so you swallow a 3-milligram gummy and wait for the wave to hit your system. That mental model is the issue. The typical user treats melatonin like a weaker version of a prescription sleep aid because they expect it to knock them out the way a sedative would. But that expectation misses what the hormone actually does. Melatonin isn't a sedative, and it's not a sleeping pill. It's a hormone that signals your internal clock that nighttime has begun, which means taking it at 10 at night pushes your biological darkness too close to your alarm clock. The disconnect is everywhere. Walk into any pharmacy and the packaging tells you to take melatonin right before bed, as if bedtime were the only variable that matters, which is exactly why few buyers ever question their timing. The data tells a different story. Swallowing it at 10 at night triggers a chain of hormonal events that few users notice until the next morning, when the damage to their cortisol rhythm is already underway. In 2024, Bachim Sawat and colleagues ran a crossover RCT with 64 healthy adults. That means every participant served as their own control, taking 2 milligrams at 8 p.m. on one night and a placebo on another, while researchers tracked sleep and salivary markers across both conditions. Sleep did get better in the trial. On the positive side, sleep onset latency improved by just over 7 minutes, p-value 0.037. Total sleep time increased by 24 minutes, p-value 0.006, which is exactly the kind of result supplement companies love to quote. Those are the numbers on the front of the bottle. But those sleep scores hide the real problem. Salivary cortisol at awakening ran higher in the melatonin group, p-value 0.023, which should concern anyone who needs to perform the next morning. That spike is your cortisol awakening response, the signal that gets your brain and metabolism online when the alarm sounds. Instead of a clean morning rise, the HPA axis reacted to still elevated melatonin, which means your stress system fought your sleep hormone at the exact moment you needed clarity. The cortisol finding is what most sleep studies ignore. They measure sleep onset and total time, then stop, missing what happens to your stress hormones the next morning, where the real cost shows up entirely. And that wasn't the only red flag. Salivary melatonin remained elevated through at least 10 a.m. The next morning, with a p-value below 0.001, which means your brain kept receiving a biological night signal while you were already 2 hours into your workday. At 10 a.m., while you're in your first meeting or your first training session, your melatonin level is telling your body that nighttime isn't over yet. 8 p.m. is earlier than 10 p.m., but the same mechanism gets worse the later you dose, because timing follows a curve and the typical user is on the wrong side of it, which is exactly why the phase response curve matters. It explains why milligrams matter less than the clock. The phase response curve sounds complicated, but the idea is simple. It's a map that shows when a stimulus like melatonin advances your internal clock, when it delays it, and why the difference depends entirely on the clock time you swallow the pill. The data on timing is overwhelming. Moon and colleagues published a 2022 meta-analysis that pooled 30 RCTs and nearly 1,300 healthy participants, finding that melatonin's effect on sleep-wake timing is strongly dependent on dosing time and dosage. The standardized mean difference ran negative 0.639, and the confidence interval didn't cross 0. So this isn't a borderline result. Their conclusion came through direct. A well-timed low dose outperforms a poorly timed high dose every time, which means timing is the primary lever, and milligrams are a secondary consideration that most supplement brands never mention. Now translate this to your own schedule. If your target bedtime is 11 p.m., your natural dim light melatonin onset likely falls around 9 p.m., which means the optimal window lands between 7 and 8 p.m. for most adults. Taking it at 10 p.m. puts you near the tail end of the advanced zone or past it entirely, which means you're sedating yourself instead of shifting your clock earlier. You fall asleep faster because the drug is pharmacologically active, but your circadian phase hasn't shifted at all. You've simply knocked yourself out with a hormone that remains circulating when your alarm goes off, which isn't circadian alignment by any useful definition, and means your brain is still processing a night signal when you need to be alert. That's sedation with a hangover. That's how much timing matters. Louis' team mapped this curve in 1998 showing that the melatonin phase response curve sits roughly 12 hours out of phase with light, which is why morning bright light and early evening melatonin both advance your clock from opposite directions. If you take melatonin too late, you're working against the morning light signal instead of reinforcing it. Your cortisol awakening response is the hormonal version of a starter motor. Within 30 to 60 minutes of waking, cortisol should spike to get your brain online and metabolism moving. And that spike turns grogginess into alertness and depends on a clear transition from night to day. Timing is everything here. Zizapel and colleagues reviewed this relationship in 2005, showing that evening melatonin can suppress early nocturnal cortisol onset in older adults, but only when timed correctly. A properly timed dose pushes your cortisol curve later into the morning where it belongs, and a late dose does the exact opposite by compressing your natural alertness window. The 2024 data gets personal here. Instead of a healthy cortisol awakening response, the 8 p.m. melatonin group woke up with elevated stress hormones reflecting a fight between their HPA axis and still active melatonin receptors. Your body tried to generate a morning alertness spike while its night signal remained turned on. That's like trying to start an engine with the parking brake engaged. Clinicians call this the melatonin hangover, and it isn't a myth. The elimination half-life of standard melatonin is roughly 2 hours. But prolonged release formulations and high doses can extend that window well past your wake time and deep into your first few hours of work. Most over-the-counter melatonin in the United States is immediate release, but people routinely take 3 to 10 milligram doses that behave like prolonged release formulations. In practice, because the sheer volume extends the clearance window beyond the 2-hour half-life. The higher the dose, the longer the tail, and the more likely you are to drag that biological night signal into your commute. At 10 a.m., your brain may still be processing a 10 p.m. dose as a biological night signal, which means you're dragging that hormone into your workday during your peak alertness window. That overlap is what drains your morning performance. Now we need to look at what the right window looks like. You can apply it without a sleep lab by following a few simple rules that the phase response curve and the meta-analysis data already mapped out clearly for anyone who knows their own bedtime. Step 1 is simple. Work backward from your target wake time. If you need to be up at 6:30 a.m. with an 11 p.m. bedtime, your natural melatonin release likely kicks in around 9 p.m., and the optimal administration window is 2 to 4 hours before that, which puts your dose between 7 and 8 p.m. for most adults. Step 2 is counterintuitive, because you need to dose lower, not higher. The meta-analysis shows effect size is driven by timing, and most adults need only 0.3 to 1 milligram for a clean phase shift, while higher doses extend clearance time and increase the risk of a next-day hangover without adding any circadian benefit. More isn't better here. Many brands sell 5 or 10 milligram gummies that flood your system with hormone you don't need. The 2024 trial used only 2 milligrams, enough to produce measurable next-day effects, which tells you that more isn't better. Step 3 is environmental. Because melatonin and morning light push your clock from opposite directions, dim your lights after taking your dose and get bright light exposure within 30 minutes of waking. That combination anchors the new phase and prevents your 10 p.m. screen habit from undoing the shift. Step 4 is the metric that matters most. Don't judge the protocol by how fast you fall asleep, because that's sedating, not shifting. Judge it by how alert you feel within the first hour of waking. If you're falling asleep faster but waking up foggy, your timing is still off and you need to move the dose earlier by 30 to 60 minutes, until the fog clears. Your individual timing will vary. This protocol is a starting point, not a prescription, because your dim light melatonin onset could fall earlier or later depending on your chronotype. If you're a night owl with a naturally late rhythm, your window may shift later, but it will still be hours before your target bedtime, not minutes. Melatonin is a circadian tool, not a sedative, and taking it too late shifts your problem from the night into the morning. Stay data-driven, and we will see you in the next